All right, we're working on game theory right now. We're going to cover the prisoner's dilemma, which is a classic game. All right, Frank and Jesse James were detained near a bank in Liberty, Missouri by the sheriff for looking suspicious. The sheriff put them into individual cells in different corners of the jail so they could not communicate with each other. He then interrogated them separately in the courthouse and gave them the same offer. Frank was told that he would spend a year in the jail for acting suspicious and having a striking resemblance to a known bank robber, or confess that his brother was going to rob the bank, and be set free, while Jesse would be put in jail for 25 years. If they ratted on each other, they would receive only 10 years. Jesse was told the same about Frank. So they would either, if neither of them said anything, they would spend 1 year in jail together. If they ratted on each other, they would spend 10 years each. If one of them stayed quiet and the other one ratted, it would be 25 years, and vice versa. All right, we each have two players, each with an action or strategy. Neither of those two, neither Frank nor Jesse, had the opportunity to talk anything over or collude. Okay, now it's time to set up a matrix because we have a game. If they both testify against the other, they each get 10 years. If one of them keeps quiet, doesn't say anything, but the other one says he did it, then the person who blames the other individual gets to go free, and the individual who stayed quiet gets 25 years. Now, if they can both manage to stay quiet, they only have to stay 1 year. All right, we're going to look first at player one, Frank James. And the only way to look at him is to assume that Jesse James testifies against him. So Jesse James, Frank assumes at this point that Jesse is going to tell on him. If Frank testifies against Jesse and Jesse testifies against Frank, then Frank gets 10 years. Now, if Jesse James testifies against Frank and Frank doesn't say anything, then Frank James gets 25 years. So, which is better to spend in jail, 25 years or 10 years? I would say 10 years. So, if Jesse James testifies, then Frank's best course is to also testify, so he only has 10 years in jail. And there we go. Now, let's assume that Jesse James keeps quiet. As far as Frank knows, Jesse hasn't said a word, so if Frank testifies and says Jesse was going to rob the bank, well, then Frank gets to go. He gets to leave. He's done. No jail time. But if Jesse James keeps quiet and Frank James keeps quiet, if both of them don't say a word, then Frank James gets 1 year. So the best option is to testify against his brother. So Frank will most likely testify against Jesse James, who he assumes will keep quiet. But what we have is a dominant strategy. No matter what happens, Frank James will spend less jail time if he testifies. If he says, my brother was going to rob the bank. Because if he assumes Jesse testifies, then Frank gets 10 years. If he assumes Jesse keeps quiet, then Frank spends no time at all. So Frank James's best course of action is to rat out his brother. That is his dominant strategy. Now, we're going to look at it from Jesse James's options, his point of view. First off, he's going to assume that Frank testifies against him. So if Frank says Jesse was going to rob the bank, then Jesse's best option would be to testify against Frank. If he testifies against Frank, he gets 10 years. If he keeps quiet, he gets 25 years. So 10 years definitely better than 25. All right, let's say now that Jesse gets the feeling that Frank is not going to say a word. So Jesse believes Frank will not say a word. Jesse James can either testify against his brother and get 0 time, just leave scot-free, or he can stay quiet and spend 1 year in jail. Oh, which is better to spend in jail, 0 time or 1 year? Once again, it's going to be 0. So Jesse James also has a dominant strategy. He should testify. Now, what happens is both have a dominant strategy of testifying against the other brother, meaning they both get 10 years, and likely would. If they just kept quiet and believed that the other one wouldn't say anything, they'd only have to spend a year. But because of dominant strategy, they're both going to testify against each other. Another thing that this brings up is the Nash equilibrium. No matter what the other individual does, both are going to testify. It's the best case for either of them. If the other one keeps quiet and they testify, great, they get to leave. If both of them testify, 10 years and 10 years, it's still better than 25. So in that regard, it is a Nash equilibrium. So we have covered the prisoner's dilemma, dominant strategy, and the Nash equilibrium all in that one game. If you have any questions about this, please get in touch with me on Twitter at FSUFRAZER, or you can email me, jfraser@fairmontstate.edu, or get in touch with me any other way you can. I'm on most social media. I think my phone number's even out there somewhere if you want to text me. But I hope you're well and healthy, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.